The restaurant was alive with the hum of quiet conversations, silverware clinking, and soft jazz trickling from the speakers. It was the kind of place where people came to close deals, celebrate anniversaries, or show off success. Everything gleamed, from the polished floors to the gold-rimmed glasses. And yet, for Ethan Hayes, it was just another evening trying to stretch what little remained of his paycheck. He sat at the corner table, his little daughter Lily across from him, her brown curls glowing under the warm lights as she drew little hearts on her napkin with a crayon. Ethan smiled faintly. She always found joy in the simplest things. To her, this small dinner out wasn't a rare treat born of a tight budget. It was magic. He leaned back in his chair, his flannel shirt slightly damp from the cold drizzle outside, eyes quietly scanning the room. He wasn't supposed to be here, not among the expensive perfumes and tailored suits. But Lily had begged to celebrate her good grades, and Ethan couldn't say no. Across the restaurant, people turned subtly as the doors opened, and she walked in. Tall, poised, effortlessly graceful, the woman commanded attention without saying a word. Her dark blue dress shimmered faintly as she moved, and her diamond earrings caught every flicker of light. The hostess hurried over, her tone suddenly more formal. "Welcome, Miss Montgomery." Heads turned. Montgomery. Everyone in town knew that name. Owners of half the city's real estate, founders of charities, and the faces on countless business magazines. Lily looked up at her father, whispering, "Daddy, she looks like a princess." Ethan smiled faintly. "She does, sweetheart. But remember, even princesses are just people." He didn't know it yet, but that simple truth would soon unravel his entire life. The heiress, Isabella Montgomery, walked to a nearby table, reserved, of course, where a group of sharply dressed men and women waited. She greeted them with a polite smile, though her eyes looked tired, distant. Ethan noticed. Years of reading people as a paramedic before he'd left that job taught him how to see what others didn't. Dinner went on quietly, until the accident. A waiter carrying a tray of wine glasses tripped. The tray tilted, and a cascade of crimson splashed across Isabella's white clutch and the floor around her table. Gasps rippled through the restaurant. The waiter, pale and stammering, bowed repeatedly. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." The men at her table sneered. One leaned back with a mocking laugh. "That's why they should train better help." The waiter's lip trembled. Isabella froze, embarrassed but calm. Yet Ethan could see the heat rising behind her polite composure. Before anyone else could speak, Lily, innocent, oblivious to social rules, jumped down from her chair, grabbed a stack of napkins, and ran across the room. "It's okay. I can help," she chirped. A stunned silence fell. Ethan rose quickly, mortified, rushing after her. "Lily." But before he could reach her, she had already started dabbing the red stains from Isabella's bag. The heiress blinked, confused, as this little girl, with a toothy smile and a heart too big for the world, looked up at her and said, "See? Not so bad. My daddy says everything can be cleaned if you try hard enough." Ethan finally reached them, crouching beside his daughter. "Sweetheart," he whispered softly, "that's very kind, but—" Then he looked up and met Isabella's eyes for the first time. Her lips parted slightly. Something in his calm, steady gaze, the warmth, the humility, the complete lack of fear or made her heart skip. She wasn't used to that. People usually tripped over themselves to impress her, flatter her, or avoid her gaze entirely. But Ethan just nodded politely and said, his voice even and gentle, "She's with me." The room went quiet again. The tone in his voice, calm, grounded, protective, carried a quiet authority that silenced every whisper. Even the men at Isabella's table stopped smirking. The heiress blinked, momentarily frozen, unsure why those 3 simple words struck so deep. "She's with me." He didn't say them like a man apologizing. He said them like a father who meant it, like someone who would shield his daughter from any storm, no matter how wealthy the people in the room were. For a moment, Isabella forgot the stain, the embarrassment, even the eyes on her. She just looked at him, a man with rough hands, tired eyes, and a presence that somehow made her feel safe. The waiter stammered another apology, but Isabella raised her hand, her voice calm now. "It's fine. Really. Accidents happen." Then she looked back at Ethan and Lily. "Thank you. Both of you." Ethan smiled politely. "No trouble at all." Lily beamed. "You're welcome, Miss Princess." A small laugh escaped Isabella, the first genuine one she'd had in weeks. As they returned to their table, Ethan noticed her glance his way once or twice. Not in the usual way people noticed others. This was different, thoughtful, curious. When the check came, he left cash on the table, exact change, and took Lily's hand to leave. But as he reached the door, a quiet voice stopped him. "Wait." He turned. Isabella stood there, holding her slightly stained purse, her expression softer now. "Your daughter, she's wonderful," she said. "And you have a way of making chaos feel calm." Ethan shrugged lightly. "You get good at it when you've lived through enough chaos yourself." Their eyes met again, something unspoken passing between them. And for the first time in years, Isabella Montgomery, the woman who could buy anything, realized she had just met someone she couldn't quite figure out and couldn't stop thinking about. That night, long after the restaurant had gone dark and the city lights shimmered like distant stars, Isabella Montgomery lay awake in her penthouse apartment. The sound of the rain tapping gently against the glass felt different, softer, almost like the world was whispering back memories of what had happened. She turned over, restless. Her assistant had texted her several times about tomorrow's meetings, but she couldn't focus. All she could see was the image of that little girl's bright smile, and the man who said, "She's with me." Ethan Hayes. Even his name, she'd overheard it when the hostess called his reservation, carried a quiet strength. There was something about the way he'd spoken, calm but steady, like he'd seen storms and learned how to walk through them. For someone who had grown up surrounded by noise, business calls, charity galas, and carefully scripted conversations, that moment of raw, simple sincerity had hit her harder than she expected. She got out of bed and walked to her massive glass window overlooking the city. The streets below glittered with late-night taxis and reflections of neon lights. People hurrying somewhere, everyone trying to get ahead. That was her world, fast, structured, controlled. But for the first time, she wished she could step out of it. The next morning, as her driver pulled up to the Montgomery Enterprises tower, Isabella's mind was still somewhere else. She signed off on reports, attended a meeting about real estate expansion, nodded through a presentation, but her heart wasn't in it. During lunch, she finally gave in to her curiosity. "Ryan," she said, looking over at her assistant, "can you find out who that man was from last night's dinner? The one with the little girl." Ryan blinked, confused. The man who helped you with the spill." "Yes." She paused, realizing how odd this might sound. "I'd just like to thank him properly." Ryan hesitated. "Of course." She didn't tell him that it wasn't just gratitude. It was something else. Something she couldn't quite name. Across town, Ethan was busy fixing a loose cabinet door in his small kitchen. The morning light slipped through the old blinds, and the smell of pancakes filled the room. Lily sat on the counter, humming as she drew another napkin masterpiece. "Daddy," she said, swinging her legs, "do you think that princess lady is okay?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I think she's just fine, sweetheart." "She looked sad," Lily said softly, "like she forgot how to smile until I helped her." That one made Ethan stop. He turned, meeting her big brown eyes, and smiled. "You're probably right." He had learned long ago that children saw things adults missed. And Lily, ever since her mother passed when she was just a toddler, had a heart that felt things deeply. Ethan brushed flour off his hands. "You've got school soon, young lady. Finish up." "Yes, so," she said with mock seriousness, giving him a little salute. He laughed. That laugh was the one thing that made every hard day worth it. Later that day, as Ethan dropped Lily off at school and headed to his shift at the auto shop, he didn't notice the sleek black SUV parked a block away. Inside sat Ryan, Isabella's assistant, holding a folder and watching discreetly. By that evening, Isabella had everything she needed. Single father, Ethan Hayes. Lives on Maple Street. Works at Pierce Auto. Former paramedic, Ryan read aloud. Widowed 5 years ago. One daughter, Lily, age 7. Isabella felt a small ache in her chest. Widowed. That explained the quiet sadness in his eyes. Ryan looked up. Would you like me to contact him? She hesitated. Logic said no. It wasn't proper. It wasn't necessary. But her heart whispered something else. Not yet, she said softly. I just want to understand him a little more first. For the next few days, she found herself driving by the school where Lily played, or the garage where Ethan worked. From a distance, she watched the way he helped an elderly customer carry a heavy box, or how he wiped grease off his hands before crouching to tie his daughter's shoe. There was a tenderness to him, quiet, unspoken, the kind that didn't need money or attention. It had been years since Isabella had seen that kind of goodness. One rainy afternoon, fate did what curiosity could not. Her car, sleek, imported, and very expensive, sputtered and came to a stop just 2 blocks from the garage Ethan worked at. Of course it did. She sat there for a moment, staring at the dashboard, a mix of irony and disbelief washing over her. Really? She muttered to herself. Finally, she stepped out, rain tapping against her umbrella. Inside the small garage, Ethan looked up as the bell above the door chimed. His eyes widened slightly in recognition. Well, he said with a faint smile, wiping his hands on a rag. This is a surprise. Isabella smiled nervously. Seems I can't escape accidents around you. He chuckled softly. Could be wise. You could have set the place on fire. She laughed, genuinely this time, and for a moment, it felt easy. I didn't come here on purpose, she said, realizing how that sounded. I mean, my car broke down. Ethan nodded, still smiling. Don't worry. Happens to everyone. Let's take a look. As he leaned under the hood, she watched quietly. There was something oddly peaceful about seeing him work. Focused, steady, no pretense. Lily burst out from the back room, wearing a tiny mechanic's apron. Daddy, I finished cleaning the tools. When she saw Isabella, her eyes lit up. Princess Lady. Isabella laughed. Hey there, sweetheart. You came to visit us. Ethan gave her a look that said please don't encourage this. But Isabella just knelt down beside the little girl. Well, sort of. My car needed some help. Your daddy's saving me again. Lily grinned proudly. He's really good at fixing broken things. That line hit Isabella harder than she expected. She looked up at Ethan, grease on his hands, rain in his hair, but eyes that carried warmth. Maybe he really was good at fixing things, maybe even the kind that couldn't be seen. As Ethan finished up, she reached for her purse. How much do I owe you? He shook his head. No charge. Consider it payback for the napkin rescue. She frowned slightly. You can't be serious. That's not fair to you. He smiled softly. Fair doesn't always matter. Sometimes kind just wins. For a moment, the world outside, the rain, the traffic, the ticking clock, seemed to fade. Ethan, she said quietly, how do you stay so calm all the time? He met her eyes. Because getting angry doesn't fix anything. And because I have to show Lily what peace looks like, even when life isn't fair. Something in her chest tightened. For years, she'd been surrounded by people who thrived on control and competition. And yet, standing in that small garage, watching this man wipe oil off his hands, she felt something money had never bought her. Comfort. When she finally left, Ethan and Lily waved goodbye from the garage door. As her car disappeared into the rain, Lily tugged at her dad's sleeve. Daddy. Yeah, sweetheart. Do you think she'll come back? He smiled faintly. Maybe. But even he didn't know how true that was. Because that night, as Isabella looked out over the glittering skyline once more, her heart whispered a truth she could no longer deny. She wasn't just curious about Ethan Hayes anymore. She was drawn to him. The restaurant had gone quiet. The soft hum of jazz music filled the room, glasses clinking faintly, forks scraping porcelain. The billionaire heiress, Elena Moreau, sat at the corner table, a name the tabloids whispered like legend. But tonight, she wasn't the powerful figure people gossiped about. She looked human. Alone. Across the room, Daniel, the single dad, sat with his two daughters, Emma and Sophie, a simple dinner out after a long week. He couldn't afford luxury meals like this, but tonight was special. Sophie had aced her spelling test, and Emma had just gotten her art displayed in school. So Daniel decided they deserved a treat. But as fate would have it, their table and haze collided in the strangest way possible. It started when Sophie's laughter echoed through the restaurant. Bright, pure, infectious. Elena looked up, almost startled by the sound, and for the first time in years, she smiled, a real one. The kind she hadn't felt since her parents' empire consumed her life. Then came the accident. A waiter, rushing past, tripped over a loose chair leg and spilled a glass of wine, right toward Sophie. Before anyone could react, Daniel moved like lightning, shielding his daughter and taking the splash himself. Red wine soaked his white shirt, the liquid dripping down his arm. But his only concern was his little girl. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" he asked gently, brushing her hair back. Elena watched from her table, transfixed. That calm tone, that instant selflessness, it hit something deep inside her. She hadn't seen genuine love like that in years. Maybe ever. She stood up, impulsively, something she never did, and walked toward them. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice hesitant yet commanding. "That was very brave of you." Daniel looked up, surprised. He recognized her face instantly. Everyone did. But his reply was simple, humble, just doing what any dad would. There was a pause. Their eyes met. For the briefest moment, two worlds collided, haze of wealth, isolation, and cold business dinners, and his of warmth, laughter, and little hands tugging at his sleeve. Emma whispered, "Daddy, is that the lady from the news?" Elena smiled faintly. "Guilty as charged," she said, kneeling to Emma's level. "And you must be the artist I've heard about." Daniel blinked. "You've heard about her?" Elena tilted her head, smiling. "I keep up with local exhibitions. The elementary school art fair had her painting online, the one with the rainbow over the farmhouse." Emma's face lit up. "That's mine." And just like that, the ice melted. Elena sat with them, laughing more than she had in years. Daniel's calm presence, his natural charm. It wasn't polished, it wasn't fake, but it was real. By dessert, it felt like they'd known each other forever. But as the check came, Elena noticed the waiter slip Daniel a paper. His credit card had declined. He tried to hide it, a polite smile, a quick reach for his phone, but she saw it. Without hesitation, Elena reached across and placed her own card down. "You've already paid for dinner," she said softly. "You just don't know it yet." Daniel looked up, startled. "I can't let you." Her expression silenced him. "You can, and maybe someday, you'll let me thank you properly." There it was again, that calm, steady voice of his. "She's with me," he said, nodding toward his daughters. The words were simple, but they carried weight, protection, pride, and something else Elena hadn't felt in a long time. Trust. The billionaire heiress stood frozen for a moment, staring at him as if seeing the world through new eyes. And just as the evening ended, a faint smile crossed her lips. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to her. Not her money, not her reputation, but her soul. Snow had blanketed the small town overnight, covering every rooftop and street corner in quiet white. By morning, the world looked softer, almost peaceful, as if it had been wiped clean of yesterday's noise. Ethan stirred a pot of oatmeal in his modest kitchen, humming under his breath while Sophie sat at the small wooden table, coloring. The warm scent of cinnamon filled the room, and sunlight peeked through the window, scattering across the old linoleum floor. For a man who'd been through his share of storms, mornings like this felt like small miracles. He turned just in time to see Sophie lift her drawing. "Look, Daddy, it's us. And Lila too." Ethan chuckled, taking the paper from her tiny hands. There it was, a crooked little family, drawn in bright crayons. Himself, Sophie, and beside them, a woman with long brown hair holding a tray of cookies. "She even has her apron," Ethan said with a smile. You got all the details right. Sophie grinned proudly. We should give it to her. She made me cookies. Ethan nodded slowly. Maybe we will. The truth was, he hadn't stopped thinking about Lila either. The way she'd looked so surprised yet fearless, the warmth in her eyes, how she'd handled Claire Donovan with quiet grace. There was something about her, something he couldn't quite name, that stayed in his mind long after they'd left the cafe. He poured Sophie's oatmeal into a small bowl, drizzling a bit of honey on top. Eat up, sweetheart. We'll stop by the cafe after, all right? Sophie's smile widened. Yay, Lila time. At the same moment, across town, Claire Donovan sat in her glass-walled office, staring out at the skyline. The city stretched endlessly before her, silver and cold under the winter sun. But her thoughts weren't on her company. Not on the board meeting she'd just skipped. Not even on the million-dollar contract sitting unsigned on her desk. Her mind was still at that cafe. At him, Ethan Walker, the man who'd looked her straight in the eye and told her, without hesitation, that she was wrong. She didn't remember the last time anyone had done that. Everyone in her life said what she wanted to hear. Everyone except him. Her assistant entered quietly. Ms. Donovan, the meeting with the Hong Kong partners. Cancel it, Claire said softly, still watching the snow outside. The assistant blinked. Cancel it. Claire turned finally, her expression unreadable. Yes, I'm going out. And for the first time in years, she grabbed her own coat and left without a driver. Back at the cafe, Lila was wiping down tables when the familiar sound of a little girl's laughter reached her. She looked up, and there they were. Sophie came bounding through the door, clutching her crayon drawing. Ethan followed behind, snow dusted across his jacket, his eyes lighting up when he saw Lila. You're early, she said with a grin, setting the cloth aside. Someone couldn't wait to see you, Ethan replied, nodding toward his daughter. Sophie held out the drawing proudly. I made this for you. Lila crouched down, taking the paper carefully. Wow, this is amazing. You even got my apron right. Sophie giggled. Daddy says you're really brave. Lila's cheeks flushed. He said that. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, smiling sheepishly. Well, it's true. Something soft passed between them, a look that lingered longer than either intended. Just then, the cafe bell jingled again. Lila turned, expecting another regular. But when she saw who it was, her heart skipped a beat. Claire Donovan. Even out of her usual tailored armor, she stood out, sleek black coat, snow melting off the hem, eyes sharp and searching. Ethan stiffened instinctively. Sophie, sensing the tension, grabbed his hand. Claire's gaze flicked to Lila, then to Ethan. I owe you both an apology, she said quietly. The cafe went silent again. Lila blinked. You don't. I do. Claire interrupted gently. You didn't deserve how I spoke to you yesterday. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, but his tone was calm. Apologies are rare in your world, aren't they? Claire managed a small smile. Very. She looked around the small cafe. I grew up in places like this, you know. Before, everything changed. Lila frowned slightly. Before what? Claire hesitated, as though saying it aloud might break something fragile. Before I forgot what people looked like when they were kind. Ethan studied her for a long moment. She didn't look like the woman who'd stood in this same spot yesterday, radiating superiority. She looked tired. Human. Sit down, Lila said suddenly. I'll get you some coffee. Claire blinked, surprised. You'd still serve me after yesterday. Lila smiled softly. Everyone deserves a second chance. That made Ethan glance at her, his eyes soft with quiet admiration. Claire took a seat. Then, thank you. As Lila poured the coffee, Ethan helped Sophie with her cookie, glancing occasionally at the two women across the counter. Something about the scene felt strange. Three worlds that were never supposed to meet now quietly colliding in a tiny cafe on a snowy afternoon. Claire took a sip, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was performing. The warmth of the mug against her hands grounded her. You know, she said after a moment, when you said those words yesterday, she's with me, I couldn't stop thinking about them. Ethan didn't look away. Why? Because no one's ever said them about me, Claire admitted softly. The words hit the air like a confession. Even Sophie, mid-bite, went still. Ethan's brow furrowed. You mean? Claire gave a small, sad smile. When you have everything, people stop seeing you. They just see the money. The name, not the person behind it. Lila set the coffee pot down, her heart tightening a little. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice low but sincere. Maybe you've been looking in the wrong places. Claire met his gaze, something fragile flickering in her eyes. Gratitude, maybe even hope. But before she could reply, Sophie tugged on her father's sleeve. Daddy, can she have a cookie too? Everyone laughed softly. The tension broke just like that. Lila brought another plate over. On the house, she said warmly. Claire smiled genuinely for the first time in what felt like years. Thank you. Ethan looked between them, something gentle settling over him. Life had a strange way of bringing people together, sometimes through mistakes, sometimes through storms, but always for a reason. As the snow continued to fall outside, the three adults and one little girl sat together, their laughter mingling with the smell of coffee and cinnamon. None of them realized it yet, but that quiet moment, in a tiny cafe at the edge of town, would change all their lives. For Lila, it was the moment she realized kindness could bridge any distance. For Claire, it was the moment she remembered what being seen truly meant. And for Ethan, it was a moment he finally let the walls around his heart start to crumble. Snow still whispered against the cafe windows long after the last customers had gone home. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon, roasted beans, and something new, connection. Lila stood behind the counter, wiping it down one last time, lost in thought. She didn't notice Ethan still sitting there, his hands wrapped around an empty coffee cup, watching Sophie draw hearts and stick figures on napkins. You two are my last customers again, she said softly, a tired but fond smile tugging at her lips. Ethan chuckled. I think we're making a habit of it. Lila leaned on the counter, her voice teasing. You say that like it's a bad thing. He looked up then, his eyes catching haze, calm, steady, the kind of look that didn't rush or pretend. It's not. A silence fell between them, not awkward but full of unspoken things. The kind of silence where hearts start to notice their own rhythm. Outside, the snow thickened. The world was white again. By the time they stepped out of the cafe, Sophie was half asleep in her father's arms. Lila stood at the doorway, watching them cross the empty street, their figures fading slowly into the blur of falling snow. Something inside her whispered that this quiet goodbye, wouldn't be the last. The next morning came with a soft golden light. Lila awoke to her phone buzzing, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. Hello. Miss Brooks. The voice was crisp, confident. This is Claire Donovan. Lila froze. Oh, hi. Is everything okay? I think it will be, Claire said after a pause. I was wondering if you might have a few minutes to talk today. There's something I'd like to discuss, in person. Of course, Lila said, though her mind raced. Why her? What could a billionaire heiress possibly want from a small-town waitress? By noon, Lila stood outside the Donovan Tower, a gleaming glass giant rising above the city skyline. She felt small stepping through its doors, her breath fogging as she entered the marble lobby. Claire was waiting upstairs, dressed simply this time, a soft gray sweater, her head down, her eyes less guarded. I wasn't sure you'd come, Claire said with a faint smile. I wasn't sure either, Lila admitted. They both Saturday. The city sprawled behind Claire's desk, but for once, she didn't look powerful, just thoughtful. I've been thinking a lot since that day, Claire began slowly. About people, about kindness, about the way you looked at me, like I was still human. Lila stayed quiet, listening. Claire's voice softened. You reminded me of someone I used to be, before money became a shield, before I forgot how to be kind for no reason. Lila's brow furrowed. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to do something right, Claire said firmly. I want to help you. Help me. Yes. Claire reached into a folder, sliding it across the table. You've been working double shifts for months. You take care of your aunt. You never complain, and yet you still find time to smile at strangers. Lila's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Inside was a contract, a grant proposal. Her name printed neatly across the top. I own several hospitality projects, Claire explained. Small business partnerships. I'd like to offer you your own café. One we'd co-run. You'd be in charge. Lila stared at her, speechless. You're serious. Completely. Tears welled in Lila's eyes, unexpected and unstoppable. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Claire said gently. And if you do, maybe tell that man of yours thank you. His words started this. Lila smiled faintly. He's not my man. Claire laughed softly. Not yet. That evening, Lila stood outside Ethan's small house, clutching her coat tightly. Snowflakes clung to her hair as she hesitated on the porch. Through the frosted window, she could see him, sitting on the couch with Sophie, reading a bedtime story. The warmth of the scene hit her like sunlight. She knocked lightly. Ethan opened the door, surprised but smiling. Lila, what are you doing out here? It's freezing. I needed to tell you something, she said quickly, her breath forming soft clouds. He stepped aside, letting her in. The smell of cocoa and pine filled the air. Sophie was already half asleep on the couch. Lila explained everything. The meeting, the offer, the grant. Ethan listened quietly, eyes fixed on her, absorbing every word. When she finished, he spoke softly. You earned that. Every bit of it. She smiled. You don't think it's too much. I think it's the world finally catching up to who you already are. Lila felt her throat tighten. No one had ever said something like that to her before. A log cracked in the fireplace. Sophie stirred slightly, mumbling something about cookies. Lila laughed quietly. She's adorable. She's my whole world, Ethan said. Everything I do is for her. Lila nodded. She's lucky to have you. He looked at her, really looked at her. I think I'm a lucky one. Their eyes met again. That same pull, that same quiet gravity that had been growing since the night they met. But before either could say another word, there was a knock at the door. Ethan frowned, walking over. When he opened it, he froze. Claire stood there, snow falling around her, dressed in her gray coat. Claire, he said, surprised. She smiled faintly. I hope I'm not interrupting. Lila blinked. You came here. Claire nodded. I wanted to see where kindness comes from. The three of them stood there, a billionaire, a waitress, and a single dad, bound by chance and choice. Ethan gestured for her to come in. Claire looked around, taking in the modest home, the family photos, the little pieces of life money could never buy. It's beautiful, she said softly. All of it. Ethan chuckled. It's small. It's real, she corrected. And that's what makes it priceless. They sat together for hours, the fire flickering low, conversation flowing easily. Sophie woke up halfway through and fell asleep again in Claire's lap. And for once, the billionaire heiress didn't flinch. She held the child gently, almost reverently. Lila watched them all, her heart full. Maybe this was what redemption looked like. Not grand gestures, but small moments where people found each other again. When Claire finally left, she hugged Lila. You've changed my life, she whispered. Lila shook her head. You changed your own. You just needed someone to remind you it was possible. Ethan walked her to the door, snow drifting in through the open frame. She's with me, he said again, smiling softly. Both of them are. Claire paused, eyes glistening. Then take care of them, Ethan Walker. I will, he said simply. When he turned back, Lila was standing by the fire, arms wrapped around herself, eyes shimmering in the glow. You okay? He asked quietly. She nodded. Just thinking. About what? How weird it is that one night, one act of kindness, can change everything. Ethan smiled. It's not weird. It's how life works if you let it. She looked at him then, really looked, and something in her chest clicked into place, like it had been waiting for this moment all along. Outside, the storm faded. Inside, warmth lingered, steady, gentle, true. And as Sophie murmured softly in her sleep, Lila whispered almost to herself, Maybe she's not the only one who's lucky. The world was white again. After days of endless snowfall, the sky had finally cleared, soft sunlight spilling gently across the rooftops, turning icicles into glass threads that shimmered in the dawn. Lila stood by the window of her small apartment, a cup of coffee warming her hands. For once, she wasn't rushing anywhere. She wasn't worrying about bills or double shifts or the long walk home. She was just still. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "We're heading to the lake later. Bring coffee. I'll bring stories." She smiled. Somehow, that was exactly what she needed to hear. By the time she reached the frozen lake, Sophie was already there, bundled in a pink coat twice her size, waving like she'd spotted Santa himself. "Lila, Lila," she squealed, slipping slightly on the ice. Ethan caught her just in time, laughing. His breath misted in the cold air as he turned, spotting Lila walking toward them with 2 steaming cups. "You're late," he teased. "I was making sure the coffee was perfect," she said, handing him one. He took a sip and sighed dramatically. "You succeeded." "Of course I did," she replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm practically a professional now." Ethan smiled. "Soon you'll be running your own cafe." She looked out at the lake, frozen, still, endless. "It still doesn't feel real." "It will," he said softly. "Just give it time." They sat together on a worn wooden bench, Sophie building a crooked snowman nearby. The world was quiet except for the sound of her laughter and the whisper of wind through bare trees. Lila took a slow breath. "You ever think about how strange this all is?" "What do you mean?" "How one random night brought all this together. You, me, Sophie, even Claire." Ethan nodded. "I think about it every day." He looked at her then, really looked. "But I don't think it was random." She tilted her head. "No." He smiled faintly. "I think some people are meant to walk into your life, exactly when you need them most." Lila felt her chest tighten, warmth blooming under her ribs. "And you?" she asked softly. "When did you need me?" He didn't hesitate. "The moment you looked at Sophie like she wasn't just some kid with a tired dad, but someone who mattered." Lila's eyes shimmered. "She does matter." "So do you," he said quietly. For a long moment, they just sat there, 2 people who had been through too much, finding peace in each other's silence. Sophie ran up proudly, holding a crooked snowman's head. "Look, he's smiling just like you, Daddy." Ethan laughed, helping her fix it back on. "You're right. Maybe he needs a friend, though." Sophie turned to Lila. "Can you make one too?" "Of course," Lila said, kneeling beside her. "But mine's going to be prettier." "No, Faye." Sophie giggled. The sound filled the cold air, bright, innocent, whole. Ethan watched them quietly, something soft and unguarded flickering across his face. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. Later, as the sun dipped low, they stood by the lake one last time. Lila tucked her hands into her coat, watching Sophie chase after snowflakes. "She's so happy," she murmured. Ethan nodded. "She hasn't laughed like this since before her mom passed." Lila looked at him gently. "She'd be proud of you, you know." He swallowed hard, eyes glinting with quiet grief. "I hope so." "She would," Lila said firmly. "You've built something real for her. That's more than most people ever do." Ethan smiled, that slow, tired, beautiful smile that always seemed to carry stories. "I didn't build it alone." Lila turned toward him. The air between them felt charged, quiet but alive. He stepped closer, his breath warm in the cold. "You know, I've been thinking." "That's dangerous," she teased, though her heart was racing. He chuckled. "Maybe. But hear me out. When your new cafe opens, you'll need someone to fix the shelves, set up the place, maybe even taste test the desserts." "Oh," she said, raising a brow. "And you're volunteering?" "I'm insisting," he said. "Payment, 1 free cup of coffee a day, and a smile from the owner." She laughed softly. "That might be negotiable." "Then let's negotiate over dinner," he said, voice gentle but sure. Her laughter faded into a shy smile. "Are you asking me out, Mr. Walker?" I think I am, he said. Sophie, still twirling nearby, called out, Daddy, are we having pizza again? Ethan grinned. Maybe we'll get something better tonight. Lila blushed, tucking a loose hair behind her ear. You're impossible. And you're beautiful, he said before he could stop himself. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then, a small, quiet thank you. That night, they ended up back at the cafe, the one where it had all started. The lights were dim, snow falling softly outside, and for once, no customers filled the seats. Just them. Lila made coffee the way she always did. Measured, patient, full of care. Ethan leaned against the counter, watching her like he was seeing something rare. I don't think I ever told you, he said quietly. That night, when you came over to our table, you saved me. She turned, surprised. Saved you? He nodded. I was drowning in silence. You reminded me what kindness sounds like. Lila blinked, tears forming again. I didn't do anything special. Yes, you did, he said softly. You saw me. Not a tired man, not a struggling dad, just me. Her voice trembled. And you saw me too, when no one else did. Ethan smiled. Guess that makes us even. The clock ticked softly. Outside, the snow had stopped. He took a small step closer. You know, I was wrong that night. About what? He smiled faintly. When I said she's with me. Lila looked up. He took her hand gently, warmth spreading between their palms. You're with me too. She didn't pull away. Her eyes glistened. I think I've been with you for a while now. And then, in that small cafe where it all began, surrounded by the quiet hum of the heater and the faint smell of coffee, he kissed her. Not a movie kiss. Not a perfect one. Just real. Honest. Soft. Outside, the neon sign flickered in the window. Open. It felt like a promise. Weeks later, Claire stopped by. The cafe was alive now. Warm, busy, laughter filling the air. Lila stood behind the counter, apron tied neatly, her smile easy and proud. Ethan was fixing a shelf in the corner, Sophie coloring quietly beside him. Claire walked in with a small bouquet and a familiar smirk. You did it. We did it, Lila corrected. Claire looked around, then leaned in. You know, I don't visit many coffee shops, but something tells me this one's special. Lila smiled. It's not the coffee. It's the people. Claire's eyes softened. You're right. Don't lose that. Lila nodded. I won't. As Claire left, the bell over the door jingled, and Lila looked back at Ethan and Sophie, her new little family, laughing over spilled cocoa. She exhaled, her heart full. Sometimes, love didn't come crashing in like a storm. Sometimes, it arrived quietly, in shared coffee, in laughter, in second chances. And when it did, you didn't have to question it. You just whispered, she's with me.